For the next few segments, we're going to discuss the law during a time of pandemic. As a society, we're now dealing with a slew of issues that simply didn't exist, forget a few years ago, even a few months ago. Quarantine, shutdowns, workplace complications, privacy concerns, and as we know, so much more. Let's start by introducing our panel. Usually they're on the desk harassing me, but now we do this via Zoom from the comfort of their homes. Let's start off at the top, Mayo Bartlett. He's an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLC, and he's also former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Doug Von Oiste, founding partner at Carsten Von Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct. He was also selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Jim Kousouros, a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, and he also sits on the board of directors in the New York City Criminal Bar Associations, frequently lecturing at New York Law School, as well as the bar associations in Queens, in New York City, and beyond. All right, guys, I know for a lot of people, they say the bankruptcy attorneys are going to be overwhelmed with work, unfortunately, in the near future. But I think there's another part of law, and that has to do with the workplace here, where obviously the doors are beginning to open, ready or not, and people are returning to work. And there is a dilemma for a lot of employees about just navigating that balance between earning money and the risk to health. And you have complications with childcare, someone sick possibly at home, and so much more. Also, some anticipate that parents, especially women, will confront biases with family responsibilities like caregiving or homeschooling. And as America starts to reopen, there's also fears of retribution if somebody complains about the workplace environment. And there's questions as to whether or not people who refuse to go back to work, even for legitimate reasons, may even be now deemed ineligible for unemployment. We're already seeing lawsuits from workers saying their employers don't adequately protect them from the virus. Jails, hospitals, meatpacking plants already facing some litigation. All right, Jimmy, I start with you, and I really mean this, between employment and labor law. Is it a case-by-case basis, or is it the president saying the doors are going to open here, that basically the employers are in the driver's seat here? They can decide what is and is not safe, and if you don't go there, I guess depending on the state, you might not even get unemployment.
Well, look, the president can issue an executive order and keep these places open, but that executive order does not nullify or vitiate other laws in place. You cannot be forced to work in unsafe conditions, and there are a host of laws to protect workers in such circumstances. So, the federal judge, this was more an issue of a jurisdictional finding, whether the person was in the proper venue. But there's no question that you cannot be forced to work under unsafe conditions. And I think that the issue that's going to arise in litigation here is, look, this is a new world. These are completely new circumstances. And so the question of what the employer's obligations are and how far they need to go and the extent to which workers can be forced to be in the position that they're in is a question that's going to come about. In terms of workers being forced to work, in terms of the hardships that they are encountering, this is going to be an issue. You have the Families First Coronavirus Emergency Act that was implemented, but it doesn't seem to really address these concerns. It only applies to companies with between 50 and 500 workers, and it only applies to giving additional sick leave, for example, for people who are diagnosed with the coronavirus or in quarantine. It doesn't speak to the issue of the people who have children at home who cannot find childcare that they would normally find because of the virus. And so there's going to be a tremendous, tremendous hardship and a ton of disputes between employees and their employers.
And I want to get into some of those with Mayo in a second. But Doug, you deal with a lot of cases as it relates to workplace safety. And you've said before, sometimes it's hard to prove the origin of if somebody gets sick. But in this particular case, take the meatpacking plant. We already have documented cases where people not only contracted the virus at work, but now you have a lot of people who've died even at a single plant here. It's no longer the theoretical, this is the factual. So if somebody goes back, they still have to work in tight quarters here, as close as 3 feet apart. And we're seeing video right now on our screen what it was like. There's only so much you can do to really segregate the workplace population in this. Why can't somebody turn around and say, I'm not going back into something that I know killed my coworkers, and you can't deny me unemployment for a legitimate safety reason?
Well, first off, let's make it clear that nobody can tell somebody that they have to go back to work. I mean, the person can say, listen, I'm not going back. At that point, they're going to still try to collect their benefits. And the argument is, well, you don't get them because you had a job waiting for you. The real problem that you have here is everybody's assuming safety violations or no safety violations, but there's also a huge amount of information out there. What is safe? What type of activity is safe? What do we have to be doing? So you can have an employee who says, listen, this place has been tested and it's deemed to be safe, but I still don't think it's safe because I heard somebody say this. If you're talking about litigation, you're talking about facts. You're talking about what somebody knew or shouldn't know and what a reasonable person is in the litigation. These are all things that have to be litigated at some point, or they can all be legislated away. At some point, you could say you have no lawsuits. This happened after 9/11 when they told everybody to get back to work down near Ground Zero safe. It turned out years later that there was information that it was clearly not safe, and they told people to go down there and work anyway. But all those lawsuits were done away with. You couldn't sue Christy Todd Whitman and the other people involved because we deemed as a public policy reasons that there was an emergency and people had to get back to work.
But there was a bit of an unknown down there as to the air quality at Ground Zero. As you said, they were proven wrong, but we now know enough about the spread of the virus, even with all the unknowns, and we know what happens in a workplace like a meatpacking plant. Now, Mayo, I'll give you a hypothetical, and it's not really one that I got to reach too hard for. You got a single mom at home, and her office reopens, but she's either homeschooling the kids here, she's got, let's say, a kid with a pre-existing condition at home right now, she's caring for someone who's ill at the house. Can she be, if she doesn't go back, lose her job? I understand, like, you use the example of disability if we want. You're not going to lose your job for it here. They might have to bring somebody else, and maybe you don't get full pay in the interim, but there are certain employee protections. What's going to happen when people have legitimate causes to say, I got other concerns here that I can't just leave because I can't bring in, let's say, childcare in the day and age of COVID?
Well, several things. One, it's going to be litigated, and there are a lot of cases that have been brought already, and it'll be determined down the road what they knew or what they didn't know. But in this situation, there's a public policy consideration also, and you have to stop and say, well, at what point do you really protect the first responders? What point do you really protect the people we designate as heroes? So it's one thing to fly the Blue Angels up and down the coast. It's another thing to tell these same people, go into the office, go work next to people who are sick and possibly lose your life. So the practical purpose of it will end up being flaunted because you're going to have people who say no. They're not going to worry about unemployment insurance because they're going to say, if I die, it doesn't really matter. Then there's going to be a question as to what kind of benefits they have. And does the Family Leave Act extend? Does that allow you, for medical purposes, to take off to care for your parent or for your child? A lot of these individuals don't have full benefits either.
All right, when we come back, guys, a horrific shooting, and it was caught on tape in Georgia. After the break, we're going to show you why this has taken so long for prosecutors to get moving on this case here, and also how COVID plays into all this.